So with the start of the regular season on the horizon, I thought I'd make another a season preview for another team. Last time I did it on the Lakers. This video is going to be formatted a little bit differently because the Lakers I did do like an off-season preview. So in the Lakers video, I didn't talk too much about their roster construction. For this video, I'm going to be touching a little bit more with what I kind of thought they did in the offseason, what I think about their roster overall. It's not going to be a total free agency grade video. It's more going to be focused on what do I think the Timberwolves are going to be doing this regular season and in the playoffs. So starting with the recap of last season, since that's going to help us kind of predict or try to predict what's going to happen this season. Last season was the first season of the big Rudy Gobert trade, and things didn't really pan out how the Timberwolves wanted to. At the beginning of the season, like the first month, everyone was healthy, and even then their defense was looking a little bit suspect. I wouldn't say it was looking outright terrible or anything, but it was looking like an awkward fit. And then, of course, Karl Anthony Towns went down for almost 50 games. It might have been more like 40. He didn't return until like the last month of the season in March. And really because of that, the Timberwolves kind of floundered and they ended up finishing as the 8th seed. They lost their first play-in game to the Lakers, but then they won the second play-in game, I think, to the Thunder. And so after winning that second play-in game, they got to play the Nuggets, who they lost in 5 games to. However, the Nuggets were the eventual champions, and both the Heat and the Lakers lost in 5 to the Nuggets as well. But even then, after this season, I would say, popular consensus and probably consensus in the front office in Minnesota is that this season was a failure because they really gutted their team for Rudy Gobert, not just some of their rotation guys, but also their future draft picks, and it ended in a first round exit. So why was the Rudy Gobert trade a failure in its first year? There's 2 layers to this. On the top layer, service level, it was just a bad trade. They gave up way too much for someone of Rudy Gobert's caliber. He wasn't necessarily that one piece that they needed to become like a serious contender, because it didn't look like at any point in the season or this season that they looked like a serious contender. On a deeper level, if you actually kind of look into it, they really kind of traded away their identity, especially their defensive identity. The season before they got Rudy Gobert, they were actually a better defense, believe it or not. Their defensive rating was technically better, but also just through watching them, they just seemed to play much better as a defensive unit, and they just seemed more engaged. And it was a weird year because, in this Karl Anthony Towns era of the Timberwolves, their defense was always just not, up to par to their offense, and that was also always what was holding them back. And that year, we actually saw that Karl Anthony Towns got much better at defense. He was much more engaged. Even D'Angelo Russell was acting kind of like as a floor general defensively. He was doing much better as well. And they added people like Jared Vanderbilt that gave them incredible switchability. And they also had Patrick Beverley, who is not as good at individual defense as he once was, but he really seemed to kind of change the culture in Minnesota some, and was probably a great leader in the locker room, which kind of played a big part in that defense being so engaged. Now, if we look at the previous season's defense, it was just awkward at times, and it seemed like Karl Anthony Towns didn't feel very comfortable always going out to the perimeter. It felt like he didn't really feel comfortable with Rudy Gobert is always going to prefer to go into the paint so he can be that defensive anchor, and it seemed like Kat and even Naz Reid at times didn't know what to do because they're just not used to always going out into the perimeter, which is what this defense is going to need if they want to really reach the peak that they can. They need to keep Rudy Gobert in the paint as much as possible, and both Kat and Naz Reid and whoever they're playing at big men need to get used to playing on the perimeter unless they're playing like the Cavs or something. And I wouldn't say the Timberwolves are necessarily doomed defensively because they do have Rudy Gobert, and I think that should really give hope to any defense. And another thing that I think people are kind of overlooking some is that, Kat missed 40 games, like I said earlier, 40 or 50 games. That plays a part in them just not meshing, and there just being some awkwardness on the court. And I think that, with this offseason, and if they stay healthy this season, I think they can work out these kinks most likely. I think a lot of that is going to depend on their coach. But I do think there's maybe a bit of a cultural or mindset problem in Minnesota that might translate into this next season. Because it really did seem the season before they got Rudy Gobert, they actually looked like an up-and-coming team. They had a very exciting first-round series with the Grizzlies, who also looked like this up-and-coming team. And they ended up losing that series, but that was okay. It seemed like things were looking bright to them. Kind of think about like they were like the kings of this year. But culture and mindset aside, I do think that they have a relatively healthy season this year. Their defense is going to improve some. I don't think they're going to become some type of top 5 defense in the regular season like the Rudy Gobert Jazz were, but I do think that their defense can get a little bit better. Now, as for what they did this offseason, they didn't do that much, and I can't really blame them for that, at least not now, because after the Rudy Gobert trade, they don't have that much flexibility because they did lose a lot of picks. They do have a little bit of cap space to go into the first apron, I suppose. But otherwise, I didn't think they could do much to really change the roster. There are a few things I wish they would have done. Primarily, I wish they would have addressed their point guard situation because last year they had D'Lo. Things weren't working out with D'Lo and the Timberwolves. I think he just wasn't happy with Rudy Gobert. And they had to get rid of D'Lo, and now they have Mike Conley as their starting point guard. Now, that went okay. He's getting a little bit older, though. I can see him being fine next season, but I wouldn't say I'm very confident in them having any type of backup point guard right now, at least like a legit one. They did sign Shake Milton, and there was a time when I thought Shake Milton could become like a rotation player. But I'm having serious doubts about that because he was just not in Philly's playoff rotation at all in the past season. And he just hasn't really been playing that much lately. I don't have that much hope for Shake Milton as like a playoff backup point guard if they want to run him like that. Now, I do think that you can kind of let Anthony Edwards run the offensive lot, especially in the playoffs. But otherwise, I'm very worried that if like an older Mike Conley gets injured, what this team is really going to do. Now, if you haven't noticed by now, I haven't mentioned a certain player. And that's because I think that this player's potential is really going to decide what this team is going to be looking at like next season. Of course, I'm talking about Anthony Edwards. Now, I wasn't on YouTube when they made that Rudy Gobert trade, but as soon as they made that trade, I literally just said to myself, well, now, if they ever want to become a serious contender, they're going to need Anthony Edwards to become like an MVP level type of guy. Their depth has kind of been depleted to an extent, and they've become, I would say, more of a top-heavy team, not one of the most top-heavy teams. But they're getting there, and I think really you're going to need Anthony Edwards to become like an MVP level candidate if you want to become a legitimate contender. Now, what is the possibility of Anthony Edwards being an MVP level player next year? Not very high, but he has gotten better each and every year. He was a first-time All-Star last year, and it's been looking like in the FIBA tournament, even though that's not over at the time I'm recording this, he's kind of been that guy in offense for Team USA for the most part. So while I'm not expecting for Anthony Edwards to be an MVP type of player next season, I do expect him to significantly improve. I would say last year he was kind of like fringe all-star level, first-time all-star. I think this year he can probably be, a solid all-star or something like some type of player that's somewhere between an all-NBA player and a fringe all-star. Or even kind of bordering getting close to the all-NBA level player that I think he will be one day. Of course, Ant taking a significant leap is going to help this team, no matter how you want to look at it. But even more importantly, not only is this going to help their regular season record, I think this is going to help them in the postseason. Because we've seen in both of the playoff series that Ant has played in, he's played great. He's played better than he did that regular season or that respective regular season. But of course, this isn't going to matter that much if they just end up getting a low seed again and they lose to the eventual champions like they did last season. So this kind of wraps back around into what I think they're going to do in the regular season. And just kind of coalescing all of my thoughts, let's look back onto how they placed last year. They placed as the 8 seed in the regular season before the play-in, and they were technically 2 games behind the 5 seed. Kind of that 5 to 8 seed range last year in the Western Conference was very tight. So they easily could have gotten to the 5 seed, like let's say if Karl Anthony Towns played every game. I don't think that's super unrealistic. So I'm thinking that if they're relatively healthy, and we see that they kind of iron out some of their kinks with this Rudy Gobert trade. They kind of figure out some things on defense, and Anthony Edwards takes a significant step to becoming a bona fide all-star, getting close to an all-NBA level player. I think it's not too unreasonable to say that they're going to be kind of like in that 5-6 seed range. Maybe 4 is kind of a stretch, but I do think that they're going to be kind of on the playoff play-in bubble. Because we do see kind of, since the advent of the play-in, it kind of seems like usually like the 5 through the 8 seed or 9 seed are all really close with each other, and then maybe like the 10 seed and below are just like not that good, or at least record-wise. So I do think that if things go well for them, injuries-wise, I think that they can probably avoid the play-in. I personally would give them like a 4 to 8 seed range. I don't think they're going to be a top 3 seed, and I don't think they're going to have a problem making it to a play-in. Overall, I kind of lean towards them being somewhere around 5 or 6. Now, when it comes to the playoffs, of course, that's going to depend on their seeding. Like I said, if I do think that they go into the play-ins, I think they're probably going to get bounced in the first round. If they do end up kind of being in one of those middle seeds, I think they have a decent chance, maybe like a 50% chance or something, to advance to the second round, because I do think that the West and that kind of seeding range is very competitive, and all those teams are probably going to be kind of like on the same caliber of team. So they have a decent shot of getting to the second round this year, I would say. They may even get to the conference finals if things go really well for them with how things play out in the playoffs, because it does feel like, there's in conference finals, there's just a team that's there that doesn't really deserve to be there, either because there's injuries or one team just totally collapses in the playoffs. So think about the Hawks in 2021, think about the Mavericks in 2022. It's possible that they make it to the conference finals, but I don't think that they're getting to the finals. I don't think that's even in the realm of possibility, because I don't think they can beat, if everyone's healthy, I don't think they can beat the Nuggets, the Suns, or the Lakers at all. Overall, I'm thinking that they definitely are going to have a better season this year, and they have a decent shot to make it to the second round, and we can say that that's progress. And all in all, looking into the far future, if they want to win a championship with this squad, they're going to need Anthony Edwards to be an MVP level player. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something you have something to say. And thank y'all for watching. I guess I'll see y'all next time.